Camilla is furious, and it's no rumor. Prince William made a bold, personal move that stunned the palace. He kicked her out of the Diana Awards. No invite, no explanation. Just a message that shook royal tradition to its core. What drove William to draw the line? And how deep does this family rift really go? Stay with us as we uncover the emotional showdown that could change the future of the monarchy. The moment that shocked the palace. It began with a silence that said everything. Prince William, steady, stoic, and groomed for the throne, made a decision that shattered protocol without uttering a word. Camilla, Queen Consort of the United Kingdom, was not invited to the 25th Annual Diana Awards. There was no announcement, no palace memo, no royal justification. Just a name missing from the guest list, and the unmistakable void her absence created. To the outside world, the decision seemed sudden. But within palace walls, insiders felt the tremors immediately. Quiet conversations turned into hushed panic. Advisors scrambled to decipher whether this was an oversight or an act of intentional erasure. And as the news leaked, first as whispers, then as tabloid fury, the realization set in: this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. For William, it marked a turning point. Long confined by tradition, he had finally stepped into a role few expected, the emotional truth-teller of the monarchy. Where others bowed to optics, he chose allegiance to memory. The decision broke with custom, yes, but it honored something far deeper. It honored pain. It honored loyalty. It honored Diana. And in that silence, something else emerged. A quiet defiance. A declaration not of war, but of boundaries. Camilla's exclusion wasn't loud, but it was seismic. It reminded everyone watching, from staffers to sovereigns, that the ghost of Diana still walks the palace halls, and her eldest son is no longer content to leave that ghost unacknowledged. Diana's legacy reignited. The Diana Award has always been more than just another royal engagement. For Prince William, it is sacred ground. Born from tragedy, it transformed into a beacon of hope, honoring young people who embody the kindness, compassion, and courage Diana once brought to a monarchy built on silence. But this year, it became something more. A battleground between legacy and legitimacy. William has often spoken of his mother not just with reverence, but with aching devotion. The award, in many ways, serves as his cathedral, a place where he can speak her name without politics, where her memory is untarnished by scandal or spin. Each year, as young humanitarians step up to accept their honors, they do so in the shadow of a woman whose light was extinguished far too soon. This is William's altar to her, and this year, it had to remain pure. So when the idea of including Camilla surfaced, William reportedly made a quiet but resolute decision. Not this year, not at this ceremony, not in this sacred space. Because to include her, however polished her image may now be, would be to rewrite history in a room built upon truth. It would blur the lines between memory and revision. This wasn't about public perception. It was about emotional integrity. William has carried his mother's pain for decades, and the Diana Award has always been the one event where that pain could breathe without intrusion. This year, with tensions high and wounds reopened by scandal, that boundary became even more essential. So when Camilla's name vanished from the list, the message was clear. This was not a slight. This was a reckoning. Diana's legacy wasn't just alive. It was roaring. And no one, not even a queen, would dim that flame. The BBC scandal. For years, Prince William had carried the weight of unanswered questions about his mother's final years, about the interviews, the betrayals, the manipulation. And then, in 2021, came the Dyson Report, the investigation that blew the lid off the BBC's infamous 1995 Panorama interview. What it revealed wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. The findings confirmed what many had long suspected. Diana had been deceived, coerced with forged documents, manipulated into speaking her truth under false pretenses. The interview that captivated the world was built on lies, and those lies may have deepened her isolation, accelerated her collapse, and pushed her further from the royal family's protection. For William, the report was more than just a revelation. It was a trigger. Standing in front of cameras, his voice trembling but clear, he issued what many saw as a declaration of war against the institution that failed his mother. This interview contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation, he said. And then, like a gavel striking down, came the words that would define his stance: "It should never be aired again." That speech marked a turning point, not just for William, but for how the monarchy interacts with its past. The scandal didn't just shake the BBC. It reignited the fire inside a son still mourning a mother lost to the machinations of both media and monarchy. From that moment on, William's mission was clear: protect Diana's memory at all costs. So when it came time for the 25th Annual Diana Awards, the context was everything. This wasn't just another ceremony, it was a spiritual redress, a moment of reclamation. In the wake of deceit, William chose purity. He chose reverence, and he chose to exclude anyone whose presence might muddle that message, including Camilla. The Dyson Report didn't just expose the BBC, it exposed the rawness of William's grief. And in that grief, he found his line in the sand. Why Camilla's presence was always complicated. Camilla Parker Bowles may now wear a crown, but to many, and especially to William, her name remains synonymous with pain. She is a symbol of everything Diana endured behind palace walls: betrayal, loneliness, and public humiliation. No matter how far she's come, no matter how carefully the royal family rehabilitated her image, Camilla's presence carries a shadow. William was just a boy when his mother sat down for that bombshell interview and uttered the line that would haunt a generation: "There were 3 of us in this marriage." The third was Camilla. And even though the world has changed, even though Camilla has taken on royal duties with grace and discretion, the emotional scars don't fade with time. Especially not for a son who remembers his mother's tears. The monarchy may have forgiven. The public may have softened. But William never forgot. Behind the smiling photos and public unity, insiders have long whispered about the complex relationship between William and Camilla. Cordial, perhaps. Polite, certainly. But warm? Unlikely. And when it came to the Diana Awards, the one night dedicated entirely to his mother's memory, that tension rose to the surface like a tide returning to shore. Camilla's history could not be quietly swept under the red carpet. Her presence would have drawn headlines, stirred debate, and clouded the very essence of what the ceremony stood for. William knew this. He felt it. And he acted accordingly. Excluding Camilla wasn't about vengeance. It was about boundaries. About reclaiming a piece of his mother's story from the narrative that once drowned her. For William, this wasn't personal. It was sacred. And no amount of protocol could rewrite that truth. William's quiet revolt. Something had shifted inside Prince William, something quiet but unshakable. For decades, he had followed the script, smiled when expected, stood beside stepmother and sovereign with a measured calm. But not this time. Not for this. The Diana Awards marked a rebellion, not with headlines, but with silence. And it began with the guest list. Sources close to the palace revealed that William personally reviewed every name, every seat, every detail of the ceremony. It was unprecedented. Normally, such logistics would fall to aides or event coordinators. But this time, William took control. And when asked why, his response was reportedly simple, resolute. This is for her, and only her. With that, a quiet revolution began. Seating arrangements were shifted. Protocols were bent. Traditional deference gave way to personal devotion. For once, the future king wasn't acting as a royal, he was acting as a son. One determined to protect a legacy that had been bruised and battered in the court of public opinion. Behind palace doors, there was discomfort, tension, even fear. Not because William was angry, but because he was clear. In a family where ambiguity reigns and statements are parsed like scripture, clarity is a weapon, and William wielded it with a surgeon's precision. This was not about politics, it was about principle. By curating the ceremony himself, William ensured that every moment, every tribute, every word honored his mother without dilution. Camilla's absence spoke louder than any speech. It said, "This is sacred ground, and I will not let her be forgotten beneath the weight of royal amnesia." What William did wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was a revolt. A son's quiet refusal to let his mother's legacy be rewritten. No matter who now wears the crown. Fury in the drawing room. When the news finally reached Camilla, it wasn't delivered with the softness such matters usually require. No palace aide offered gentle phrasing or royal spin. It arrived plainly. She was not invited to the Diana Awards. Not expected. Not welcome. And the reaction, insiders say, was volcanic. In the privacy of Clarence House, where royal tempers are rarely seen but deeply felt, Camilla reportedly fumed. To be excluded from a major royal event, and one covered wall-to-wall by the press, was more than a professional embarrassment. It was a personal affront. "I've stood by this family," she's believed to have told close friends, her voice cracking with disbelief. "And this is how I'm treated?" Staff scrambled to contain the fallout. Not just the media strategy, but the emotional temperature within the walls of power. Because Camilla's fury wasn't simply about public optics, it cut deeper. It spoke to decades of work rebuilding her image, earning cautious public trust, and carefully integrating herself into royal tradition. And now, with one stroke of a pen, or more accurately, the absence of one, all that progress felt undone. What made it worse was the symbolism. This wasn't just any event, it was Diana's event. And by omitting Camilla, William wasn't just setting boundaries. He was drawing a line through the past. Camilla knew that. Everyone did. And yet, the palace remained quiet. No clarification, no olive branch, just silence, cold and deliberate. A silence that told her the decision had been made, and it would not be walked back. In that silence, Camilla was forced to face a bitter truth. The past, no matter how carefully buried, has a way of rising. As her anger simmered, another question began to grow. One even more unsettling. If William could make this move now, what else might he rewrite when the crown eventually becomes his? A King's Dilemma. For King Charles III, the decision placed him in the most agonizing position a father and a monarch can face. On one side stood his beloved wife, Queen Camilla, outraged and humiliated. On the other, his eldest son, heir to the throne, fiercely loyal to the memory of his late mother. Between them, a silent war neither side dared declare publicly, but both were already losing privately. The king had known for some time that William carried emotional wounds that protocol alone couldn't heal. He had watched his son wrestle with duty and grief, balancing royal obligations with the rawness of a boy who lost his mother in the most public of ways. And Charles, with his own complicated past, had hoped time might ease that tension. But the Diana Awards changed everything. Behind closed doors, Charles reportedly tried to remain neutral, encouraging understanding and unity, royal code for saying nothing at all. Yet neutrality offered no comfort to Camilla, who saw his inaction as betrayal. Nor did it pacify William, who viewed his father's silence not as diplomacy, but as indifference. Insiders suggest Charles did voice concerns in private, not about the exclusion itself, but about the consequences. He feared this unspoken rift could widen into a chasm, that if left unresolved, it might fracture the very family he now led. "This cannot become our legacy," he is rumored to have told a senior aide. And yet, even a king has limits. Charles ultimately chose not to intervene, perhaps because he understood what the moment meant to William. Perhaps because, deep down, he too bore guilt that could not be absolved with titles or time. Whatever his reasons, the damage was done. The father said nothing. The son said everything, without saying a word. And the monarchy moved forward, not as one, but as something quietly splintering. William's emotional wounds resurface. The cameras may capture a poised prince, but behind William's composure lies a reservoir of grief that never quite dried. The BBC scandal didn't just reframe history, it reopened wounds he had spent years learning to hide. And as the Diana Awards approached, those wounds became impossible to ignore. The Panorama interview was once seen as Diana's defiant truth, but after the Dyson report, it became a symbol of exploitation, a broadcast betrayal that deepened her isolation and hastened her downfall. For William, it wasn't just about journalism ethics. It was about watching his mother be manipulated again and again by people who claimed to care. The report stirred everything. The long-repressed images of his mother alone in Kensington Palace, the days he saw her cry behind closed doors, the way her voice cracked when she spoke about being hunted, misunderstood, discarded. And above it all, the bitter knowledge that he had been powerless to protect her. That powerlessness has haunted him. But now, as a man, as a father, and as a future king, William is no longer powerless. The Diana Awards are his chance to reclaim her narrative, not the tragic one, but the transcendent one. And excluding Camilla was not an act of malice. It was a shield, a way of drawing a sacred circle around Diana's legacy, unmarred by the complexities of royal compromise. William's choice may have seemed cold to some, but it was born of heat. The slow-burning fury of a son who never forgot how the world failed his mother. That memory isn't a burden he carries. It's a purpose he lives by. And this year, that purpose led him to draw a line that couldn't be crossed, even by a queen. Diana vs. Camilla. There are halls in Kensington Palace where time stands still. Rooms that once echoed with Diana's laughter now sit in quiet memorial, touched by light, shadow, and memory. And for William, walking through them is not just a journey through his past, it's a confrontation with everything the monarchy tried to move beyond. 3 of us in this marriage. The words are more than just infamous. They're etched into the architecture of William's life. They shape the way he views loyalty, trust, and love. And no matter how polished Camilla's public role has become, she can never be separated from that phrase. William has never publicly condemned her, never made scenes, but those close to him say that his every decision is weighed against the question, what would my mother think? And when it came to honoring her legacy, truly honoring it, he knew he couldn't allow revisionist history to cloud the truth. The world may have accepted Camilla, but William has never invited her into the sacred space of Diana's memory. Not really, not emotionally, and not now. The ghosts of Kensington aren't hostile. They're mournful, protective, watchful, and in their gaze, William found clarity. The past doesn't vanish with a crown. It lives on in choices, boundaries, and quiet refusals. So when he crafted the ceremony this year, he didn't just exclude Camilla. He invoked a presence that still looms larger than life. Diana, not as a victim, but as the mother he still fights for. And in that decision, the world saw something rare. A prince choosing truth over peace. The ceremony without Camilla. The 25th Annual Diana Awards unfolded with a kind of sacred precision, every detail echoing a son's devotion to the woman who shaped him. The venue gleamed not with grandeur, but with reverence. Photographs of Diana, smiling and radiant, adorned the walls. Her voice played in snippets, reminding everyone of the empathy and fire she carried so effortlessly. William arrived alone, but not alone in spirit. Beside him in purpose was Catherine, Princess of Wales, serene and unwavering. But one face was unmistakably absent. Camilla. There was no explanation, no last-minute cancellation, just her name, conspicuously missing from the seating chart. And though no one on stage mentioned it, her absence felt loud, intentional, necessary. The ceremony flowed like a love letter to Diana. Young award recipients spoke of being inspired by her compassion, her bravery, her refusal to conform. William's speech was quiet, tear-tinged, and raw. She believed in people, in kindness, he said. And that belief lives on through all of you. Behind the applause was something deeper. A release of guilt, of restraint, of decades of diplomacy. For the first time, William didn't have to share his mother's memory with anyone who once made her suffer. The cameras may have shown elegance, but beneath it all was a reclamation. Not just of legacy, but of voice. Diana's voice, William's voice, and in the space left empty by Camilla, something powerful was born. Clarity. The steady compass. Amid the emotional turbulence and quiet rebellion, one figure stood like a lighthouse in a storm. Catherine, Princess of Wales. While William channeled the intensity of memory into action, Kate embodied the composure that held it all together. She didn't need to make speeches or issue statements. Her presence alone said what William could not. This family, this future, is rooted in love and principle. She had helped shape the tone of the ceremony from the beginning, not as a passive consort, but as a partner. It was Kate who insisted the focus remain on the young recipients, on the legacy of hope Diana ignited. She worked behind the scenes to ensure that the event was filled with grace and dignity, even while tensions flared beyond the public eye. Insiders described her role as calm but commanding. She stood beside William not just in marriage, but in mission. And unlike so many palace players before her, Kate didn't need to take sides in the ghostly war between Diana and Camilla, because she already stood on sacred ground. Her quiet empathy, her charitable work, her maternal warmth, all of it echoed Diana in the best of ways. Where Camilla's presence would have stirred old wounds, Kate's solidified healing. She reminded the audience, and perhaps the monarchy itself, that Diana's spirit could live on not only in William's grief, but in his joy, in his marriage, in his children. As the ceremony unfolded and cameras captured William's stolen glances toward his wife, it became clear Kate was his compass. Through grief, through duty, through legacy. And in the silence left by Camilla's absence, Kate's elegance filled the space with quiet power. Divided, yet moved. Once the ceremony concluded, and the photos made their way onto front pages and timelines, the public reaction was immediate and emotionally charged. Social media lit up with hashtags like #ForDiana and #WilliamDidRight. To many, the prince's decision wasn't controversial. It was courageous. A son, finally speaking in his own language, action. This was her moment, and hers alone, read one viral post. Another simply stated, William did what Charles never could. There was an outpouring of empathy, particularly from younger generations who had grown up with the mythos of Diana, the people's princess, silenced too soon. For them, this wasn't about palace politics. It was about emotional justice. They saw William not just as a royal, but as a grieving son refusing to let history gaslight memory. But not everyone agreed. Some royal traditionalists bristled at the optics. Excluding a queen, they argued, undermined the very unity William was meant to preserve. They questioned whether grief should ever trump protocol. A few even suggested it was a dangerous precedent, allowing personal emotion to steer the monarchy's course. Still, even critics admitted one thing. The ceremony had emotional weight. It moved people. It reminded the world of who Diana was. Not the tabloid version, but the real woman. And it revealed the depth of William's conviction to carry her legacy forward. In the days that followed, no palace statement was issued, but the silence only amplified the story. Because while the public debated the politics, the message had already been received. And for millions watching, the heart of it was undeniable. This was about love, raw, unresolved, and unforgettable. The palace stays silent, but watches closely behind the golden doors of Buckingham Palace, where public silence often masks private strategy. The aftermath of the Diana Awards did not go unnoticed. No press release addressed Camilla's absence. No comment was made about guest lists or unfortunate misunderstandings. The firm did what it always does when faced with internal conflict. It watched, quietly, carefully. But make no mistake, this wasn't a moment the monarchy could ignore. Within palace corridors, whispers swirled about what this meant for the balance of power. William hadn't just made a statement about his mother. He had flexed royal muscle and broken with tradition to do it. Senior aides reportedly noted the shift. William had bypassed the old channels. He'd taken control of a major event. He'd sent a message not only to the public, but to the palace itself. His reign would not be bound by the ghosts of the past or the rules that once failed his family. Some insiders admired his conviction. Others were alarmed. Because if William could exclude a queen consort today, what might he challenge tomorrow? Camilla's camp, according to several reports, felt blindsided. And while Charles remained characteristically silent, those around him began recalibrating. They saw the storm clouds forming, not of scandal, but of succession. A monarchy redefined not by continuity, but by correction. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was a shift in energy. From the old monarchy of decorum to a new one driven by emotional truth. And within that shift, every silence became strategic. Every choice, a signal. The firm was on alert. Because William, once the obedient heir, had drawn a line, and everyone inside those walls knew. Lines, once drawn, are hard to erase. A new kind of royal. The Diana Awards were more than a tribute. They were a declaration. And at the center of it stood Prince William, no longer just a grieving son or dutiful heir, but something far more powerful, a leader in transformation. His decisions surrounding the ceremony didn't just reflect personal grief. They revealed a deeper ethos, one that values authenticity over tradition, emotion over rigidity. In doing so, William showed the world a vision of monarchy that felt startlingly modern, not less royal, but more human. He didn't need to denounce Camilla to make his point. He simply acted, excluded, recentered. He let the absence speak for him, while the ceremony honored the presence that shaped him. Diana was no longer a memory confined to the past. She was an anchor to a future built on compassion, not conformity. And in William's choices, the monarchy saw a new kind of power, one forged not from duty alone, but from moral clarity. Where his father once yielded to institution, William now challenged it. Where others sought preservation, he sought redemption. This wasn't rebellion for the sake of spectacle. It was a recalibration of values, a sign that the crown, when it one day rests on William's head, will carry not just the weight of history, but the courage to confront it. And while some may view his actions as divisive, others saw in them something long overdue, a royal willing to defend the emotional truth of his bloodline, even when it hurts. Because true leadership isn't about who you include. Sometimes it's about who you choose to leave out. What happens when a son defends his mother's memory? In the end, it wasn't about Camilla. It wasn't even about the monarchy. It was about a boy who lost his mother and the man he became because of it. Prince William's decision to exclude Camilla from the Diana Awards wasn't petty. It wasn't theatrical. It was sacred. A son defending the only thing he has left of his mother, her legacy, her truth, her voice. What happens when a prince draws a line for his mother? He becomes something the monarchy has rarely seen, emotionally transparent, morally uncompromising, deeply human. In protecting Diana's memory, William did what the crown never could. He acknowledged the pain beneath the pageantry. And in doing so, he didn't just preserve the past, he reshaped the future. This wasn't an act of vengeance, it was an act of love. And in that love, raw and unwavering, William showed the world a glimpse of a different monarchy. One built not on tradition alone, but on truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Diana always wanted. William's silent stand spoke volumes, and Camilla felt every word of it. A royal line was drawn, and Diana's legacy came roaring back. If you found this story as gripping as we did, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.